Welcome, everyone, to the 10th episode of the Mac and Riley podcast. Today we have Reese Strathearn. Strathearn? Did
Strathearn.
I say that right? Strathearn, yes.
Yeah.
From Scotland here to talk about some really cool stuff. This is a treat today, to say the least. We're going to be diving into oxygen, carbon dioxide, and their effects on behavior, mitochondrial health, energy production, all the above. This is going to be a crazy episode headed our way. So let's get it kicked off, man. Reese, how are you
All I
doing?
know is I'm going to learn a lot.
We are, yeah, get
So
your
I'm,
notes
I'm
out,
actually like ready with my note pen in hand.
guys. Let's go. Yeah, Reese,
Let's.
brother, how you doing, man? It looks like you're getting ready to go camping.
Yeah. We're pre-journey to going camping. Me and my girlfriend. So we've pulled up just before we've hitched up. So that's what all the shenanigans is in the back. So we're going to pitch up. There's like a nice loch, kind of where we live. Nice little water and hills. Scotland's good for that.
Man, I can't imagine. I bet Scotland is beautiful out in that area.
I actually just saw a reel today on Edinburgh, and it's like one of the biggest cities in the world with no skyscrapers, just like castles. And I was like, looks beautiful. I don't know how far you are, but
Maybe I'd say
From
30
where
minute
to there?
drive. We're just the other side of the bridge, and
that's
then
it.
yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's cool.
Crazy.
Part two of this episode, Mac and I are going to travel to Scotland.
Yeah.
We'll go rent a studio out there.
Do it. See the history.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about there is everything is just so old, man. Here in the United States, things that are old are not that old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, where I live
Like we,
currently, it's in Stirling. A lot of that's where like the battles were between Scotland and England. So it's got a lot of history of like William Wallace and stuff like that with the battle. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
yeah,
We're
that's
gonna have
super
to make a
sick.
trip. MXR
Do
tour.
MXR tour. Let's go.
it. Class.
Gosh.
Well, super sick. Well, Reese, man, I'm excited to dive in. So, just real quick, what is your background, man? Like, what got you into all of what we're about to talk about? What got you into health and fitness coaching? Kind of what, is somewhat brief story. Like, what is your story, man? Like, where did you
Yeah.
come from? How did this all come about?
I'll give you probably the diluted version because I think on the second episode you could probably have a whole episode on that. The way I found breathwork was it came from the back of like a really bad spell of depression, to the point where I pretty much, the easiest way to say it, like I didn't want to be here. And I tried like everything. I was quite stubborn with where my emotions, and I think that place where I got to was like the catalyst just to pretty much deconstruct everything in my life, like just crumble it to the ground. But it led me on a journey. I sold everything back home. I had a pain management kind of studio for 6 years. That was really successful. Done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, coaching. I'm a purple belt in that. And then I blew my knee. I started putting on weight, had a bad relationship, brought up all these insecurities. It was like self-destruct. And then I sold everything, telling myself that I just need a break, but it was me just running away. And then when I came back to Scotland, I think that's like when the real work started. It was like you ran away from those problems, but they resurfaced. So yeah, it kind of got me into the breathwork side of things. I found conscious connected breathwork for that, which is like the more deeper emotional processing. And that one experience was like 90 minutes long, and I had like this outer body experience. Never taken any psychedelics in my life, and it kind of blew my mind. So I was literally like out my
Wow.
body at one point, and I was like looking down on my body in my house. So from that, my mind was just open to this like, I don't even know how you explain it. It's like that altered consciousness. And I think if you've just been living in a world in this like four walls inside a box, until you step out of that box, that's just your reality. So when I got into the conscious connected breathing, I was doing events all over the world, and then it came to a point where I felt like something was missing. It was like my intuition was always looking for something deeper. Like what's actually going on in the biology when we're doing this? Because everybody in the spiritual community, they just talk about like tetany, when your hands kind of cramp up like this, and you see people doing these emotional, like when they're kind of doing big scream releases and crying, you'll see them in the photos where their hand are kind of cramping up. And then what I found out is when I started studying the science of like breathwork and the biochemistry was that this is actually quite bad, because you've taken someone right out of the pH range of breathwork to the point it's shifted the bicarbonate in the kidney and it's used up the calcium. So we need the calcium to relax the muscles. And because it's absorbing all the calcium up and then the bicarbonate, it's actually creating the tingling sensations and the cramping up of the hands. So you've taken someone out an extreme position of homeostasis. But no one's really like looking at these effects in the wellness space. Long term, like what is that doing to someone's health? I think we're
Reese,
broken up
could
a
you
little bit.
explain what exactly is causing the calcium leak?
Yes. So what tends to happen is these styles of breath work, because we're doing super ventilating, we're offloading the carbon dioxide, right? So if we look into the baseline of the pH in the blood, we're essentially cleaning the blood up because it's in an alkalotic state. So then if we look at the efficiency of gas exchange that way, it's the actual kidney it's probably going to be taking a lot of the buffer in, because you're then having to like excrete the bicarbonate to try and bring it back up to like acid-base balance to bring the pH into homeostasis. So the body only cares about bringing you back into pH. It doesn't really care about the actual excess buffering of the kidney and the cells. So when it's using up this calcium that's already there, it's now having to shift its set point of producing more calcium. So you're changing the buffering of these organs within the body. And then what we're producing in terms of calcium, lactate and stuff like that as well. So if you've altered that, then we don't really see that inside the body, right? It's not until maybe months, years down the line that you start to feel these effects, because it's actually the cells that are taking the shift, like the dysfunction in the cells.
How are people feeling that shift as well? Like how you said, it usually takes months or years to feel that shift. What does that shift appear as?
So what I've been looking at in terms of when you start to see the correlation in hyperventilating, a lot of people assume they just breathe normal, right? And it just takes the smallest decrease of carbon dioxide, I think around 3 milligrams dropping carbon dioxide, so the mercury. If we drop just like 3 milligrams, that's enough just to put you into an alkalotic state. So you imagine someone, even me just speaking right now, I'm offloading the carbon dioxide. It's enough to drop me into like an alkalosis state or start to change that shift in the pH. If you do this longer than 6 hours, I think it is, that's where you start to see the shift. It has to be longer than 6 hours. So if you then tie into someone's personal life, most people have maybe been breathing fast, shallow, rapid for months or years of their life, whether it's through stress, emotion, behaviors. Most people are breathing too fast. We have a current breathing rate per minute of like 20 breaths per minute. And only a decade ago, it was like around 7 breaths per minute. So we've nearly like 3x their breathing rate over the last couple of decades.
Wow. That is great. That's something. So I used to do, I don't know if you're a big yoga guy, but I used to do vinyasa yoga, which basically forced you to take deep breaths as you transition between poses. And so you were forcing breath through positions and movements that you really don't want to be taking deep
Yeah.
breaths or slow breaths. And after those sessions, I never felt better because you almost were like forcing yourself to push through limitations of breath. And then afterward, you're like, I feel like my breaths are a lot deeper. And I felt that almost instantly. That's
Yeah.
crazy that you say that.
And then you can tie that back to like your end tidal volume, where there's like a FRC, fixed range point of breathing, because of like the volume and capacity of the lungs, depending on how deep you breathe, will take more exertion of energy to expand like the lungs capacity. So this is why, like in vinyasa, if you're going into a compressed position, the FRC point of breathing may be more challenging. So It's forcing you to kind of breathe deeper into that expansion to get the deeper breath for the gas exchange as well. Now you imagine someone who's creating anxiety or stress and they breathe into the upper chest. There's a shift in the FRC point of breathing. So their end tidal volume changes as well because there's a lot of dead space. So there's a lot of unused oxygen in the dead space and a lack of gas exchange. So they will also breathe a lot faster and shallower as well. So again, this is where it's then shifting society in a lot of hyperventilated states. When you use that word, people just assume they need to have this dysfunction of breathing to classify themselves as hyperventilating. But more people than you probably think suffer from that.
So what causes that? What are the habits, besides like maybe stress in general, that people are doing that we're not aware of that causes us to be in that hyperventilative state?
This is where we can go deep. Yeah.
Let's go.
So obviously I'm going to check in on like notes just to keep it on track. But I'll break it down in a way where it kind of, even people viewing, so hopefully they can try and follow along without getting the terminology too deep where you lose them. But I want to talk about like the predictive system within the brain.
Insanely helpful for
me
too.
Sweet.
Okay.
So
Yep.
if we go into the predictive system, which is, think about it as, remember back in the olden day when we used to just hit record on a tape and it was like it would just record every time we hit that record button, like the old tape. So that's the way I like to look at this part in the brain. And every time there is a change in breathing rate or a change in pH or homeostasis, this is being recorded in at the state of consciousness within the brain.
That's really interesting.
Got it. Yep.
That's
okay.
very interesting.
So there's memory. There's memory of how of your breathing rate.
Yeah, memory, learned memory,
Okay.
past memory learning. So this is a big part of it. So you think about within the brainstem, coming up the spinal cord, the direct pathway when it's detecting breathing rate, stretch receptors, or any stimulus from breathing, it's received at the central command center. So that's like the first stop. And then that's going to relay the information to the thalamus. So then if we look at the thalamus within the brain, imagine this is like the gate before it goes to the prefrontal cortex.
Got it. Okay.
Making sense? So I'll break down the thalamus in terms of the role and how that's relaying the information over.
Yep. Okay.
So the thalamus, if we look at like that as a gate before it relays the information over, it's going to be selecting signals that are relayed for further processing before it reaches the frontal cortex. So it's ensuring that the cortex
so
receives,
it's kind of deciding.
Yeah, it receives the.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
What would kind of be some real life examples of a homeostatic threat in modern day?
Wow.
So does this track on lab work? So if you were to pull like serum blood and measure CO2, would that be shown in real time?
Got it. Interesting. So is this, when you read this in blood work, is that a snapshot? It's a snapshot of that period of time, but is that indicative of how that person has been that day or possibly within that past week? Or how often can these things change and how far can you extrapolate from that day's blood work into that person's metabolic state? Got it. Yeah. Okay. So when you walk someone through breaking these habits, and I do want to get back to that too, how long does that typically take? How long does it take to kind of turn that around?
That's crazy. Is he paused for you?
Yeah, I think he might be paused.
It'll because this happened with me and Courtney, it'll cut this part out. If it notices like a technical error.
Okay. Hopefully nothing happened.
So let's just see.
Didn't die or something.
Back.
That's insane. So or should we wait it out so that it can cut this section out?
I think we could pick back up until he comes.
Okay. Is it?
Wait, he just left.
Oh no. Hopefully
he's
he'll be
probably
back.
going to exit and try to come back, I think, because I had to do this with Courtney.
Did you? Okay.
It
And then
was
when
on
you
my
uploaded
end,
it,
though.
did this section, it just cut it all out?
Yeah, I was just like, technical error found, cut this clip, and I was like, yes.
Okay.
So you'll probably see that after.
Okay. Do you want to just keep rolling?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see if he comes back. Let me see if he has messaged or anything.
Yeah. We'll see if he comes back. That's crazy. So being stressed, like this is going, I'm digging deep because there was a time in my
Okay.
life where like in bodybuilding, my body wasn't responding to anything.
Do you mean like cutting food, cardio, or you meaning in the opposite
Both, like
direction as
gaining
far as
muscle,
weight?
it was just like gaining muscle was hard. It was more and more fat. Losing fat, I just held on to it like crazy, and muscle wanted to fall off. Like just always the opposite of what I wanted. And
Even though you were doing everything right.
yeah, well,
Okay, okay.
relatively compared to,
Yeah.
um,
You
but
were
but
you were still being
super
proactive.
stressed at the time, but very stressed. Like I'm sure my pH was always out of that area.
Right. It was never in range. I'm like, while
So
he
like
was talking, I was really thinking like, hey, like how do I breathe? Because that's not something I think about.
it's not something you think about.
Like I
And that
just
was
do.
that was something you should try vinyasa yoga at
Yeah.
some point. Like
I would love to.
that's something after those sessions, I would be without control. Like I would be thinking about my breath for the rest of the day. I would notice that I'm breathing deeper, and I would just notice my breath. Probably because my brain is sitting there, what he just said, up the brainstem through the thalamus into the prefrontal cortex. Like we're witnessing a change in breath behavior. We
Yeah.
can't help but notice.
And I've actually had clients too, like if I prescribe them any sort of like nervous system regulation or like box breathing or anything like that, they're like, I can't take a full deep breath, like a full belly breath.
Yeah.
Have you had
Yes.
that before?
I haven't had that, but I do have people that say I just breathe shallow all the time.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is a learned behavior.
Right.
And
Right.
you got to break out of that learned behavior.
Right. And it makes sense. Like everyone is go go go. Even if you don't say like I'm a really stressed person, you're probably still in that go 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 mode. Especially if you have a mobile device, which who doesn't have a mobile device? Like it's constantly something, 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 something new, something coming up. There's no time to just breathe, like literally breathe.
Just breathe. Well, that's something like anytime I get stressed, because I try not to like get stressed about that I'm stressed.
Yeah, I struggle with that so bad.
You know what I mean? But that's the
I'm like,
first thing
crap,
I
I'm
notice.
stressed now. This and this and this and yeah,
Yeah, but that's the first thing that I notice is that breath is shallow. Like I'm always at the bottom, like breathing all the way out and then like 20% in. Almost
yes,
even hunched over too to try and like the body's trying to get comfortable with that. And you notice, you're like, man, I'm not breathing very good. Hold on. Like take a breath. Literally people say take a breath as in like shut up for a minute or whatever. Like actually like take a breath because you're probably not breathing right now. Or if people say like don't hold your breath, that's funny. Like don't hold your breath on this. Well, it's funny
uh,
because if you're like really anxious and really anticipating the result of something, you actually are kind of holding your breath. You quite literally
yeah.
are
He
like not breathing very
basically
much.
just proved that from like a literal physiological level.
Yes.
Like actually, you
That's
are
actually a thing.
deserving it.
I hope I'm gonna check on.
I know. I'm like, where'd he go? Um, I mean, I'm sure we'll have him on again nonetheless, but that was
That was already insane. So
yeah.
recap what he said. If you are low pH, if you are high pH but you're low bicarbonate,
Mm-hmm.
if you're acidic but you're bicarbonate, that's a metabolic issue.
Yes, and I was going to ask him, if he was talking about metabolizing the carbon dioxide, or is it actual a metabolic dysfunction like what we talk about with like lipid? Oh, he's back. He can clarify. Awesome. Hello.
There it is.
Yo, sorry. What happened was, I don't know if you've experienced this, but my Samsung just literally says it was overheating.
Oh, that happens.
I've
Yes.
had that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then I just like shut everything down, and then I was like, oh my god, I was like, what am I gonna do? So yeah, that's what happened. Sorry for
We were just
You're all
chatting.
good.
We were just chatting, and then I brought up a question. So I guess now I can ask you this question.
Mhm.
Regarding when you say like metabolic dysfunction, are you talking about metabolizing that carbon dioxide or on a deeper level than that?
You could look at you could look further into the kidney, then look at the bicarbonate, and then because if it's not a respiratory issue, then it's going to be metabolic, right? It's going to start to affect other organs and cells within the body, because if we're getting the lack of, it's not just only bicarbonate the kidney produces. We're going to have to then look at like lactate and acid and all these other things. So it's like, how is that then maybe affecting the metabolic side of our body? How are we breaking down foods? How are we exerting energy? How's our mitochondria, etc.? That's where I'll tie back in at the end. We'll go like deep into that in terms of where I was going with the brain part through the three last gates channels before it reaches the prefrontal cortex. So obviously it's going through the assessing of homeostasis, the detection of anxiety, homeostasis threat, and then emotional. So they all link back into the amygdala. And then obviously the amygdala is a fear response.
Hmm.
And going off of what you mentioned earlier, Riley, was the memory learned memories. So going off of past data, past experiences,
Got you.
whatever that information is it's being relayed, if it's like if we look at the valence, high arousal and negative valence, is going to signal into the amygdala that there's high threat. The amygdala is then going to project that into the cortex, and that's how we're going to perceive and exert that reality in our consciousness. We're going to detect threat all around us, and that's then going to do a top-down process. And then what's that going to do? It's going to dump noradrenaline, cortisol into the body, and it's going to speed up the breathing rate because it's got perceived threat. Does that make
Man,
sense?
I've got a big question then. Like learn memory and conditioning. Like
Yeah.
your breathing changes as a result of a threat, but if your breathing changes without threat, can you cause threat by breathing differently or on
That's
accident the
that's
other way?
really interesting.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Essentially, yes,
Creating
essentially.
your threat, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's look at the example. Yeah, this will answer it. So let's go back to the hunter gatherer days. Everybody likes to take us back to those times, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Even if we don't know if it was real or if that was the times, but let's relive that moment. Let's say we were out there and we had to go out hunting. Now, our natural instincts, our interoception, our instinctual connection from our gut and our internal awareness to the brain. If we were out hunting and we seen, I don't know, he's want to go into the dinosaur ages, or do we want to just use like a tiger or something?
Yeah,
So
do
anyway,
like
if you've seen any of those in front of you, automatically, or a big grizzly bear in America, your heart's going to start pounding a little bit, right? But what's the first thing you would have done? You will hold your breath.
yeah. Yep.
Now, if we look at the breath hold itself, what it does is it cuts off the detection from the chemoreceptor. So it shuts down almost like the central command center a little bit, just for a little
Okay.
bit. So
Okay.
what is happening there when we hold the breath? The CO2 will rise. Then
Okay.
when you start breathing again, the rising carbon dioxide is sending a high threat, the fear response, into the amygdala. And that's then going to send noradrenaline and cortisol into the body to speed up the heart, to speed up the breathing rate, to give you the cortisol and noradrenaline as energy to either fight with the prayer or to run. So that's like what our intelligence has actually done. It's been created that way. But what do we do now in this day and age is like if we feel threat, like an anxious conversation or an argument with your partner or just a bad day at work, we suppress that emotion. We don't really go and run it off or get
So it
rid of the
basically
electrical
sticks,
charge.
and you stay in that state.
Yeah, and now what it's doing is then it's getting programmed, right? If we go back into the programming, the predictable system, all it's doing is doing memory learning on that. Just because your heart rate was speeding up through the anxiousness feeling from the email, it's now just pre-programmed that almost into the level of consciousness. This is what I was talking to Justin about, is the more you feel anxious around that, pre-anticipation kicks in. So it's a learned memory. You go back to that anxious email, you go to send it the next day at work, feel anxious again, And if you feel heightened in that situation, it gets anchored in even deeper. So it's just, then it just becomes like automatic. It's like this unconditioned, unconscious behavior.
Wow.
So
So
how
how?
does this? Oh, sorry, Riley. You can go ahead with your question first.
Oh yeah. How do you? So how do you? And this is probably getting ahead of ourselves, but how do you uncondition that? How do you break that conditioning where it's like someone now sees emails as the same as a grizzly bear?
Hmm.
Like how do you get them in the back? It's like it's just an email, man. It's
Good
okay.
question. So this is where I kind of seen a lot of Justin's work tie into similar work that I would do with a client. He's big on getting the nervous system into that parasympathetic shift, right? Parasympathetic shift. So if we look at that as the foundation, like there's no way I'm going to get someone in to do more breath work or more tools when they're in a heightened state. So if we want to look at their sleep quality, how many hours are they getting? Are they getting efficient rest and sleep? Because with that, there was a study done. What they done was taking a randomized group of people. They gave them 1 day of sleep deprivation, and then they put them into a heightened state, and they got them to look at a neutral face on a bit of card. And 80% of the participants perceived the face as angry. So now you
Wow.
look at
Did they have
you
a
look at
counter
poor.
group that was not sleep deprived?
Um,
No,
that would be interesting. I would like to see if there
I
was.
would
No, I
love
was
to
just
see
looking
that.
at. Yeah, I would look at see if there is that counterparty, but 80% is like a huge shift. So you can imagine that day when you've just had poor sleep, and then you go to work and you think your boss is against you, or people are against you, or you've just it's one of those
Wow.
days, right? Because you're perceiving threat all around you just from a lack of sleep and a heightened nervous system.
Yeah, that may, like your default is protect yourself.
Yeah,
So the brain's like, well, if we default to threat, you're going to be safer than sorry, whatever the threat may be.
This is freaking crazy.
That's
Reese,
insane.
I'm curious if you, beyond just like typical life, day to day stress, work stress, kid stress, whatever the case may be, worked with anybody with like severe PTSD or trauma and how you uncouple that, since that's obviously going to be a bit more deeper rooted than like, oh man, I'm stressed about this email.
interesting one because before I went deep into like the physiology and the chemistry of breath work, I was obviously doing the conscious connective breathing, which was taking people deep. And my old instructor would tell me the technique is just you going deep and holding trauma until I figured out that it was the calcium. So I was learned from one of the top conscious connective breathwork practitioners. But the interesting part was because I experienced it firsthand, it shifted me out of my depression because but when I look back at it now, it was dissociation because you're almost dissociating from the thing
Wow.
that's creating the
So
depression,
the
right?
depression was still there, but you just
Yeah.
weren't present in it.
No. So I managed to
Wow.
shift out of that depression in like one session, but looking back at it, I just dissociated. The problem was still
Mm,
there, but it got me out of the
wow.
depression.
Wow.
So with
This
PTSD,
is
I've had
blowing my mind. This is blowing
people with PTSD, deep depression, anxiety. I've had them come to my events, and because I didn't really know this at that time, I was just more using my voice and creating a safe space. And people would go deep in those sessions for 90 minutes. They were obviously experiencing deeper outer body experiences, altered states of consciousness. And I've had people who have overcome their PTSD. But
That's
I look
incredible.
back now and can we look at that as they have overcome the PTSD or the anxiety? And is it still there because of dissociated? And it's almost like a new identity shift. That's the interesting part that I'm still trying to connect the dots because it's an altered state of consciousness. We're trying to figure out what is the actual shift here that's causing this.
Yeah. Like if they are just now better at keeping that more repressed
Yeah, yeah,
versus getting rid of it or
yeah.
working past it or through it.
That's it. So
So do you think
this,
that's why? Do you think
yeah,
that's why like psychedelics work so well? Is they basically they remove that dissociation barrier?
yeah. I think
That makes
because
sense.
of the change. The interesting part would be to see if there's a change, like in the neuroplasticity. Like that would be the interesting part because here's the catch with conscious connected breathwork. If someone comes in with a heightened state, right, nervous system's jacked up, anxiety, depressed, whatever, you are more suggestible when your nervous system's high, when you've got high arousal.
Yeah,
So
got it.
the
Yep.
person leading the room, is he then projecting the words on that he's molding you into what he wants you to become? Or is he leaving the mind be open to you who's taking part to express
Wow.
and to change?
So
Or do
this
they
could be,
latch on to the words and then they have the dissociation and identity shift through their suggestible words and programming?
yeah, that's mind blowing. So on the flip side of all this, like this could be used in a really dangerous way if you're not careful.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's when I took a back step and I was like, I need to kind of revisit this until I got all the answers, which was more the biochemistry, understanding pH, what's going on in homeostasis when we come out the pH and stuff like that. And for me, it's yeah, that's been a journey in itself. But now trying to communicate this to people, because the wellness community, the hippie community, or whatever you want to call them, they they're just stuck in this era of breath work. It's like they almost, then you ask them, are they just chasing that high?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's
So
like
with that being
they don't
said,
want to know the reasons because like then it might break
yeah.
down.
Yeah, they
With
get
that
Want to
triggered
being
chase
when I
that.
said,
speak about this stuff.
how do you feel about like box breathing or like stuff like that? What is your take on that presently with all that you've been through?
Yeah, I love it, because typically what I love is they're starting to integrate it into schools, right? Trying to bring breathwork into camp kids. And here's the thing where it used to trigger me a little bit, because everybody just assumes because they're going to do a breathwork event or this mini 8-week course, they're a breathwork practitioner. And I used to get a little bit annoyed about it, and then I just kind of had to let it go. Is someone comes in and goes, right, you just need to take some deep breaths, do some box breathing, but then you can put someone into more state of panic, because what you're doing is slowing the breathing down. And if they have a bad relationship and sensitivity to CO2, what you're doing is when you slow the breathing down, the carbon dioxide is rising. They feel panic because of the change in the CO2. And then going back to the predictable system in the brain, if the amygdala is fearing the threat response, you're just then feeling that anxiety again, and it's heightened more. You've just now anchored that in a deeper level of panic.
Wow.
From my opinion too, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it could amplify issues. Let's say you're like, okay, I'm gonna do box breathing for 5 minutes. Set a timer for 5 minutes, do the box breathing. Cool. And then you go right back into your normal breathing pattern. I could see that being an issue. Like
Yeah,
amplifying the issue.
yeah. So this is kind of where it ties back into when you ask me, like, what would I do to change the behaviors in people? Is you think about it, you didn't breathe like that when you were born, so you've learned these behaviors over time due to certain situations of your life, whether it's stress, relationship, whatever. You've learned those behaviors of those breathing patterns, so they can be unlearned. But what we need to do is strip it back. We need to have awareness of it. We have to have the fundamentals of breathing correctly. Like, I mean, literally breathing into the proper lateral expansion of the rib cage. Everybody thinks pushing the abdominal out. This is like so wrong. We want to go lateral expansion into the diaphragm, rib cage, lower back, and up into the rear thoracics, because that's the biggest lung capacity. And then
Got it.
you will just want to let that exhale fall away naturally. But the here's the catch with it, is you want to try and condition eventually, when you get used to the CO2 change, is bringing very, very minimum oxygen in, because we need less oxygen. We don't need more unless we're training. So it's getting people to slow the breath down back to almost 4 to 7 breaths per minute, but also changing the behavior to carbon dioxide, because you can't hypnotize like a chemoreceptor, because it's a part of our body. But if we have a relationship and sensitivity to the change in carbon dioxide by the chemoreceptors, this means that we can almost rewire the behavior. But we need to find
Got
out what the behavior is. So the minute we get people to slow down, slow their breathing down, what you'll tend to see typically is the type A personalities. So someone who says, I can't sit still for 5 minutes. Oh, I need to do more work. I need to train. I
You're
need to
looking
do
at one of
this. I
them.
need more coffee.
You're talking to both of us.
And
Great.
what's going on here is like the minute you're slowing down, it's a rise in carbon dioxide. So now you're feeling affect, the biological change, right?
Mm,
Then you're feeling the sensation, the feeling, and then you're then going to process the emotion. But what tends to happen is that interoceptive awareness, a lot of people suppress it. And they'll either smoke, they'll have coffee, they'll go to the gym, or they'll do more work. And they'll avoid the change in the biology of the breathing because they don't know how to slow down and actually work with the actual chemoreceptor and the sensitivity to the CO2.
I don't know
so
about you, Riley, but I'm feeling pretty called out.
yeah.
I,
Now I'm wondering, like, do you just going through that process, you fix the breathing, you get in a better breathing pattern, and then do you basically just say, look, there's going to be some anxiety here, but you need to anchor that in that, look, you're in your house, you're on the floor, you're okay. It's anxiety. It's worse. That anxiety that you feel from this response right now is the worst as it's ever going to be. We're just going to keep getting better and better as you learn to realize that breathing is good, pretty much.
Yeah, you're pretty much getting the right point. So if we look at why do we breathe through the nose? And a lot of people, some people are mouth breathers, right? But if we look at the olfactory system, the nerve in the nose, it's directly connected to the emotional center. So we can start to anchor in things through smell. So we can start to use slow nasal breathing, but using things where maybe an incense or a smell that they like, an oil, something that brings calm and relaxation. So when people are going to bed, we try and like anchor in smell,
Yeah.
because if we anchor that into the predictive system, it remembers the slow breathing through the smell. It will just go back to the automatic slow breathing, right? But only if you find safety in that. If you still feel elevated, they're still going to feel the fear response. So it's about changing. What we can do is do things like breathing through a straw, to slow the breathing down, to create a little bit panic, or we can
Mm,
do 1 minute of hyperventilating, and then we get people to do like a pseudos test. It's a perceived exertion of threat, and we get them to score it. Does this feel like anxiety? Does this feel like threat? Did I feel like a loss of control here? And did that feel like the time you had an anxiety or stress? Can you relate it to the same situation? And then we start to go like,
gotcha.
yeah, that felt like that time I had like anxiety, or that time I had a breakdown or whatever. And then you say like, look at the pattern here. It's the same feeling, but now we're doing it in a controlled manner. And then
Yeah.
where the changes, the study was done on this. I'll try and find a paper and send it in. Fear, something that created like fear, say it was like sky high on the chart. The people that went into that same fearful situation and revisited the event, the participants over time, as they kept revisiting it, the fear dissolved. So it was no then longer perceived as threat or fear. But that was only in the participants who felt calm and safe in their body. The people who felt heightened fear response or threat, it actually made the fear response worse.
Interesting. Okay. So then at night, you just set aside. How does that look like at night? What is that? What does that new
Nighttime,
routine
yeah.
look like at night for them?
So nighttime, that's usually the tricky one. That's where you find people who've got a coping mechanism through their phone.
Hmm.
They like to dissociate because that's their time to shut off to the world. But it's their
Yeah.
coping mechanism because they're slowing down, they're in their bed, carbon dioxide is going to change. So they're
Hmm.
avoiding the relationship to the change in the biology again. And usually the phone will be the first thing that people will anchor themselves into. So
Interesting.
we try and eliminate phone, blue light, UV light, sleep hypnosis. We anchor on smell, maybe redecorating the room, different color, psychology through color. So every time that they're coming into the room and they're coming into the practice, we need to make sure that they're into that calm state. If they feel elevated, I try and get them just to stop it and then go into like the sleep hypnosis and just try and relax into the body then until we can start to get the nervous system, like the foundation, into a parasympathetic shift. I don't typically add the breathing in until we get the perceived stress response. There's a scoring system of like traffic lights, red, orange, and green. until I get it to the low levels of moderate stress in amber and green, I don't start to stress the body with any breathing. So I make sure that the nervous system's calm. So when we do this practice, we can really work with the relationship and sensitivity to the CO2.
That makes a lot of
I'm
sense.
assuming too, like a lot of this has a tie into just general circadian rhythm, especially when you're talking
Yeah,
about the wind down sleep component.
yeah, yeah, huge. If we look at, a lot of people like to reference Huberman with his cortisol curve. When we're sleeping, there's two major spikes of cortisol. So we get the first dump in our sleep, and that's what brings us into REM sleep. That's what's going to start to waken us up. But then as we wake up, we get that next big spike, which is where we're consciously aware of the cortisol spike. So essentially, if we've got that healthy cortisol curve, we should be working in that 90 to 2 hour window in the morning where we get natural daylight, not on our phone. We can then start to look at things that's going to kind of elevate that cortisol, getting photons into the eyes, cellular recharging, grounding, whatever, being hydrated. These things will help that curve spike even more. So then when it flattens off, we start to flatten off at nighttime. And then if someone, this is where we can start to then look at mitochondria and cell health. If someone got like a flatlining baseline of cortisol, where it's just, we're not really getting that spike and it's just kind of flatlining all day, that's going to be harder for them to sleep at night because we're not really getting that spike and then the drop. So they've still got levels
Interesting.
of
They're
cortisol
just kind
within the
of
body.
inching along
Yeah,
throughout day and night.
yeah, pretty much. And it's harder to drop it down because if we then start looking at ATP and jacked up nervous system, where are we reserving the ATP? Where is it getting reserved and stored? Fat cells, we're going to store it into the fat. We're going to look at breaking down glucose, glycolysis a lot easier. So then we get the blood sugar spikes. It's because it's easier to break down that energy than it is the fat. So, but then if we're holding tension and chest breathing, we're also exerting that ATP in secondary group muscles for breathing. So we're starting to like use up all our mitochondria ATP and we're using it for places of like stress rather than letting it be the powerhouse that it should be.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is where my brain goes with it from like a physique perspective. If you are conserving carbon dioxide, wouldn't that mean that your body would also be trying to conserve energy as a whole and conserving calories, thereby leading to potentially more body fat gain? I don't know if my head's going in the
Good
right
question.
direction.
Go over that one last time just to make sure I'm processing that. Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is if your body is trying to conserve energy as best as possible and
Yeah.
the airflow as best as possible, so holding on to as much oxygen as possible due to that shallow breathing, would that also transfer over from a metabolic process to thereby when you eat, your body is trying to conserve those calories versus burn through them? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, no, that probably leads us into the part where I think where I was saying where we tie it back into mitochondria. What I found over the last couple of days when I was looking further into it, because I said to Justin I would tie back in what I've found on my end and trying to tie in the work that he's doing, and he's huge on mitochondria as we all know. But when I was going like super deep into it, I was just like I was kind of getting lost, and then eventually it kind of just clicked. If we look at the two phases within the mitochondria. So we've got like the glycolysis part. When I looked into the glycolysis part, the amount of ATP produced by per gram was like 3 ATP per gram or something like this.
Okay.
But then if we look at the anaerobic part of the breakdown in the mitochondria, so that uses the oxygen, right? So that's where we go into oxidative phosphorylation. So with the adequate usage of using the oxygen, the ATP was like 36 per gram that was getting produced in the mitochondria. So if we look at something that doesn't use oxygen, which is glycolysis, and then the part of the mitochondria that does use the oxygen, there's a huge difference in terms of the cellular energy. We've got like 3 compared to 36. So
Yeah.
our body would obviously prefer this side of it. But now if you look at someone who is hyperventilating or offloading, the carbon dioxide, they're going to actually have poor perfusion within the lungs because they're not breathing deep enough into the lungs. So it's the depth that we get the optimal gas exchange. So if there's shallow breathing, we're not getting the depth of the gas exchange. So we're getting the oxygen binding into the iron, the hemoglobin. But because there's a lack of carbon dioxide, there's no diffusion happening in at the cell. So it's carrying the oxygen around the body, but it's not diffusing. So it's actually not dumping the oxygen into the cells. So this is where we get oxidative stress. We're not getting the actual oxygen into the cells. So if the anabolic side of it, the metabolism side of things, like where it's burning down the oxygen, imagine there's a lack of oxygen there now. We're not really going to get those 36 figures, are we, in the ATP?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's not got the oxygen to use this. So this is where we relate breathwork, why it's so important, because think how many cells have mitochondria in it. Then think about if we have a poor breathing pattern and we're not getting optimal gas exchange, we're not breathing deep enough, we're hyperventilating, we're offloading CO2. Where do you think a lot of these dysfunctions are happening in the cells? Through our breathing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Lack of oxygen.
So this is just my bodybuilding mind thinking more on this. If we're breathing super shallow, would that make the bottom part of the lungs, if you're not fully taking a breath in, would that cause atrophy?
Good question. If we look, yeah, that's probably a good question. That the sports side of things, as much as I do the side of sports, I've not really looked in terms of someone who does like bodybuilding.
I'm more
Uh,
talking about the lungs. Like, are we going to see atrophy within the lung? Because obviously there's dysfunction in the lung already. But are we
yeah,
going to see like actual atrophy of the lung, basically?
that would be interesting. That I could answer if I look into it, and I can come back to that.
I'm
It's
very
not a
interested.
whole I've really looked at it, but
I'm sure.
looking at looking at someone who just shallow breathes, just looking at that as the whole function of the respiratory system. Just typically looking at what's going to be happening there is you're not really getting the optimal gas exchange from alveoli too, right? So we're
Yep.
not really getting ventilation perfusion. So there's going to be vasoconstriction happening and things like this, lack of oxygen getting to the cells and to the brain. So if all these things are kind of happening through the restriction of the gas exchange through depth, then for sure, if looking into that personally, I think you would. But I'm not going to quote that I'm correct on that. I would like to look into it. Good question. It's not
It seems
really
like over a
something I've
long
actually
enough period
asked.
of time that you might like have some dysfunction, like maybe some atrophy. If you like shallow breathe for like years and years and years, potentially, I mean, it seems like you.
For me, it's like looking at everything. Like if that's shifting the ATP in the mitochondria, it's shifting the bicarbonate in the kidney. Already, like what are these things doing to the rest of the body? Like what's really going on with the deep cellular level? Like really going down into that, the cellular health. Because if someone's doing that unconsciously over and over and over, then you put the behavioral part on it, the stress part on it. It's like all these factors piling on top of each other. It's like cardiovascular disease is one of the biggest killers going, like
Yep.
diabetes, all these
Yep.
things, but they're all related to obviously breathing as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Because it goes down to the cell level. Like if you're not mitochondria, if it's dysfunctional, you don't have good ATP production,
Mm,
everything else is going to suffer. Like
that's it.
everything, your body's going to compensate for that in ways that aren't going to feel good in one way or another, whatever that is.
So, yeah, that's the kind of thing, the thing that I'm trying to look at, like holistically, everything as a whole. And then trying to kind of look at the bloods and things like that, like seeing if there's, when you're running people's bloods, like what state are they in when you've done your data on the breathing as well. So if your numbers are changing when I do the breathing, their perceived exertion of stress is down, their well-being scores went up, their Bolt scores improved, their exhale max test is improved, their lactate's improved. Then you run bloods. Are you seeing a similar change when the bloods are changing and these numbers are changing as well through breathing? That's the part I would really like to link and look at data over a longer period of time.
Yeah. Okay. So what does a typical program look like for you? Like, say you have someone, Reese, that they're struggling to breathe, they're breathing shallow a lot, they have they're stressed all the time, they're freaking out about emails, like you said. Like, what's a good first line approach, a good program to start with? Maybe a couple habits throughout the day. It's like step one, let's start moving you out of this stressed state.
First one, without looking at sleep, um, I would be looking at their awareness to their breathing. Like, how aware are you to your actual conscious ability to breathe? Like, how long are you going? If there's like 22,000 breaths per day, right?
Yeah,
Something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So, like, how many of them are you unaware of? And how many of them are through the mouth or in the chest or fast? Or, like, can you see, like, where the pattern is? So, it's first thing would be like bringing awareness to it. Then, are your mechanics correct? Are
Mm-hmm.
you breathing shallow, deep into the rib cage, into the lower back, into the thoracics? And then are you kind of like letting this kind of cadence just naturally happen? Like breathing in for 4 and out for 4 and just finding that flow of breathing? Or are you tense? Or are you breathing fast? So it's like trying to bring the conscious attention to the breathing to try and keep breaking down the unconscious like patterns of bad breathing. So like anytime they catch themselves mouth breathing or anytime they catch themselves holding their breath or offloading carbon dioxide by speaking a lot. Like right now, I'm probably going to feel tired after this because I've spoke a lot. So you'll find that now I've offloaded that carbon dioxide, can I re-regulate my nervous system? So it's like trying to bring that optimal level of the nervous system back up to balance. So personally, I think awareness, right breathing mechanics, then from there, you would then start to work with the nervous system, really trying to get it into a parasympathetic state, calm, relaxed, and only then would I build on the relationship with CO2. I would never try to bring apnea training or widening someone's tolerance window until the nervous system felt relaxed.
Gotcha. So does that look like maybe wake up, sunlight and grounding for 10, 15 minutes, like a walk out in the sun after meals 2 or 3 times throughout the day, and then maybe like a 10, maybe 1 or 2 10-minute sessions of just breath work awareness type of thing? Or
Yeah.
how would you
Yeah.
break that up?
What I like to do is get in someone almost a sleep diary, because on there, if you get a detailed one, you can do your AM and PM and write your habits and behaviors down. When you're having caffeine, but getting them to check in what their breathing was like at those parts of their day when they had caffeine, when they had work, when they had training. Start to limit high intensity training at night so it's not keeping the nervous system aroused. um I'm being conscious of this phone, by the way. I might need to wrap it up after this because the battery's going to
Yeah,
die.
you're good.
Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, looking at the behavior inside of like the sleep diary, let's say someone starts to monitor they're having excess of caffeine, they're having caffeine at 5 p.m. because it's still in the system for 7 hours. They then go and do like a high intensity workout at 8 p.m. You start to look at like their breathing then. Did they down regulate after their training session? When are you having food when you come home? Are you having it late at night again? Then there's more food. So then the metabolic breakdown is going to heighten the nervous system. Um, so for me, yeah, like you said, the grounding, getting light, trying to integrate the natural cadence back in. Um, Grounding, starting to realize, am I waking up tired in the morning or am I waking up with too much energy? And from there, you can then choose what style of breathing you're going to do. Because some people might have low arousal and they're just in that like depressive state and
Hmm.
they don't have the energy. So for me, I wouldn't slow them down again. I'd get their nervous system jacked up to get more energy. So a faster breathing for like 5
Yeah.
minutes, and then
Yep.
nasal breathing after to kind of help bring them back to balance.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. But if someone wakes up and it's like, what am I going to do today? Let me see my to-do list, man. I'm trying to catch up. It's like
Yeah,
box breathing or something.
slow down. Yeah, they need to slow
Yeah.
down.
Got
They
it.
need to like, yeah.
Wow.
Man, that is interesting. That's a lot to say for someone who wakes up and gets on like social media or something. If like I got to stay away from my phone for 30 minutes or so, or sometimes longer. I mean, I'll go a couple hours if I have to. Just
Yeah,
because as soon
try
as
an
you open
hour at
that,
least. Yeah, 2 hours.
yeah,
Try to work with that 2 hour window within the natural cortisol spike, and then only then start to introduce caffeine or any stimulants after that.
got it. Okay, I like that idea. Even training.
Breathing after food for 5 minutes, like slowing the breathing down, nasal breathing after food. Um, Bedtime, I would integrate yoga nidras and sleep hypnosis. So for someone who lacks sleep as well, I would start to integrate that into their life.
Yeah. Okay. Man, those were good tips,
This
man.
was
This has been
incredible. We've got to
yeah,
have
this has
you
been
back
insane.
because I know there's so
Yeah,
much more we could dive into.
Yeah,
But
I wanted to get in like the metabolism process and things like that, and it's like,
we
oh
will.
man, that
We
could be a
will.
whole.
We'll get him back on. We'll get him
Yeah.
back on.
we can do
If
that as
viewers
part
Yeah.
vote,
two.
that'd be nice too.
Yeah.
If we could get some viewer questions for the next time when you come back.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, if anybody's got questions, then let's log them and we can obviously dive into them. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay. Cool. Well, Reese, man, thank you for joining. You guys have fun out there camping.
Yeah. I have so
Get,
much
get
fun.
Mhm.
lots of good breath
Disconnect.
work out there.
Get some. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, do some in the hills and at the water.
Let's
Love it.
go. I'm
Love it.
excited, man. Thank
Class.
you again,
Thanks for
and
having me
we
on,
will see
guys.
you guys.
Thanks for your time. I'll see you
All
next
right.
time.
We'll see
See
you
ya.
guys next time.